Bill, second reading.
This bill is set down for committee stage forthwith. I declare the House in committee for consideration of the Duties of Statutory Officers, Census and Other Remedial Provisions Bill. Mr. Chairman.
Speak up. Members, the House and Committee on the Duties of Statutory Officers, Census and Other Remedial Provisions Bill. The question is that Part 1 stand part. Call Chris Hipkins.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Very happy to take a brief call. Goodness, that's very loud. Take a brief call on this Part 1 of the Duties of Statutory Officers, Census and Other Remedial Provisions Bill. And I say to my colleague Trevor Mallard, I'm just getting warmed up. But give it some time and we'll get there. Part 1 enables the census to take place in March 2013. Without this bill, the government statistician would be in breach of the Statistics Act if a census is not carried out by the end of 2011. The point that I want to raise here is I think this is actually a reasonable piece of legislation, and it's not something that the Labour Party would normally be opposed to. It's not something that I would normally be opposed to. I fully understand the circumstances under which has made it impossible for the Chief Statistician to conduct the census this year as required by law. But I think given that, in spite of that rather, it's still important that the democratic process of this House is followed. In cases of real emergency, where the House needs to act quickly, it has done so. This is not one of those cases. There is no good reason why this bill needs to go through the House under all stages tonight under urgency, and why the public should not be allowed to have their say through a truncated select committee process. And I've listened to all of the government members. I've been here since this debate started. We've been through the first reading, the second reading, and now we're into the committee stage of this debate. And not one of the government members has actually given us a reason, including the Minister, why this must go through all stages under urgency. Not one of them has given us a reason why it shouldn't be referred to a select committee for, say, a week to allow people to make submissions. I don't think that there is a bill that I have been involved with in this Parliament that's gone to a select committee that hasn't been improved by the select committee process. Because as much as everyone may think that we've covered off every possible avenue, one of the wonders of the democratic process is that anybody can have a view on a bill, anyone can raise a concern or an issue, and quite often they actually improve the legislation as a result. And I don't think that there is any reason why this bill shouldn't go through that process and people should not be allowed to have that. We could still get it passed in plenty of time to allow the chief to let the chief statistician out of the legal requirement to conduct a census before the end of this year. The earthquake that triggered this the census not being able to take place took place in February. It is now August, and this is the first time the House is debating this legislation. That's absolutely ridiculous. This could have easily been dealt with before that. Section 23 of the Statistics Act currently states that the census of population and dwellings of New Zealand shall be taken by the Department in the year 1976 and in the fifth year there, in every fifth year thereafter. What this, of course, does is it changes that so that it won't be every fifth year. In this case, it will end up being the seventh year after the last census. That does, of course, raise concerns about the compatibility of the data. I want to disagree with my colleague Trevor Mallard here, which very unusual for the two of us to disagree. But I actually accept the Minister's point that the timing of the year is quite important, and that even if we can't do it every fifth year, we should at least strive to do it at a time when the data is going to be the most comparable with the data of previous censuses. And so doing it at the same time of year, I think, I say to my colleague Trevor Mallard, I'm looking forward to his contribution on this. I actually do think that doing it at the same time of year as the regular census would normally happen is a good thing. So this bill, of course, does allow for that. It allows the census to take place in March 2013, which was, I understand, the preferred option recommended by Statistics New Zealand. The other option was to go, as the US has done, to 10 yearly censuses. I think that would be, I think that there are a whole lot of reasons why we wouldn't want to do that. We have a relatively small and in some cases quite fluid population, and I think that the 5-yearly census is one that we should try to get back to, and I hope that every 5th year after 2013 we will continue to do the censuses. Although, actually probably that's a question that I'd like the Minister to address. Would the next census take place 5 years after 2013, or would it actually happen sooner than 5 years after 2013? So I think that's a question that I'd certainly like the Minister to answer for me, because there are a lot of government processes, a lot of our democratic and constitutional... Mr Chairman.
I call the Honourable Member Chris Hibb.
Thank you. Mr Chairman, a lot of our democratic and constitutional processes rely on the census. For example, the most readily cited example is the electoral boundaries. We were told... I had this discussion with the Minister at the all-powerful... well, in Pōmari there aren't many people left in Pōmari at the moment because Phil Heatley's demolishing all the houses and leaving the land empty, so it wouldn't be much of an inheritance. But I did actually raise this issue with the Minister, Maurice Williamson, at the all-powerful Government Administration Select Committee's hearings on the statistics estimates. I raised the issue of electoral boundaries, and he assured me at that time that doing the census in March 2013 will still allow sufficient time for the boundaries to be redrawn in time for the 2014 general election, and I'm sure members of the House will be interested in that. Although, given that there was bound to be some toing and froing between myself and my colleague Trevor Mallard on where the boundaries should go, I'm quite happy to relieve him of the burden of representing the people of Nainai. I think that's an area that will very well fit within the Rimutaka electorate boundaries. But coming back to the issue, coming back, that's a terrible thing to say about the people that you purport to represent, Mr. Mallard. But I do want to come back to this issue of why we are debating why we're debating this Duties of Statutory Officers, Census and Other Remedial Provisions Bill under urgency, under all stages. We've had the first and second readings tonight, and we're now in the committee stage, and I understand we're doing the third reading immediately after that, without having given even the public even a small opportunity to make comment, without having given the Select Committee an opportunity to receive advice. Now, I can say that this could have been dealt with very quickly by the Select Committee, and it could have gone through the process required. Now, one of the reasons why I think that this should go through the process is our statistics system is part of our constitutional framework. And I think it's quite outrageous that the government are proposing a change, even in this emergency situation that prompted it. It's quite outrageous the government are proposing a constitutional change without following any sort of democratic process in doing so. And I was concerned by the process that we followed in this House immediately following the earthquake with regard to the emergency legislation that this Parliament passed. I was willing to let those concerns go on the basis that that was a very urgent emergency and Parliament needed to do something. But having said that, I think we can learn a few lessons from the process that was followed there. I think that legislation undoubtedly could have been improved if there had been time for it to go to a Select Committee and for people to have a say on it. It didn't. And, I think we accepted that because it needed to be done urgently. This doesn't need to be done urgently. And actually better management on the government's part would have avoided the need for this to go through urgent. It's still not urgent now. I mean, we still have until the end of the year to pass this legislation, or until the election probably, to pass this legislation. So we've got another couple of months, yet the government are trying to put it through under urgency this evening. And I think that is of real concern. There is no reason why it shouldn't go to a select committee. There is no reason why it couldn't be improved through public submission, through the select committee having the opportunity to get some advice from experts on the matter. And I think it could have been done very quickly. The Minister, of course, had the regulatory impact statement on this piece of legislation back in April. And I think it's somewhat of an indictment on his effectiveness and influence that he's waited until August to bring this bill before the House. And then, of course, when he was confronted with that earlier, he mumbled something about Bill English, and all the pennies dropped, all the bits fell into place, and we understand, of course, that Bill English and Maurice Williamson are the two closest colleagues in the National Party caucus. And so, of course, we fully understand why this legislation hasn't come before the House until now. But finally, look, this should have gone to a select committee. There's no reason for it to be pushed through under urgency, and I am looking forward to hearing the Minister's answer to the question that I just raised with him, and I'm looking forward to contributing further as the debate progresses.
Chairman.
I call the Honourable Minister Maurice